A beautiful woman posted an ad looking for a rich husband. What she got back destroyed her in the most brilliant way possible. This is the story of the most savage financial advice ever given, and it went absolutely viral. Let me tell you exactly what happened, because this is genuinely one of the most brutal takedowns in internet history. Somewhere in the mid-2000s, a young Swedish woman decided to post an anonymous ad on Craigslist. Now, Craigslist back then was wild. It was the internet's bulletin board for everything: jobs, apartments, random services, and apparently, husband hunting. This woman described herself as having extraordinary beauty and extremely seductive charms. She wasn't shy about it. She knew she was attractive, and she was ready to use it. Her post was simple and direct. She was looking for a wealthy man to marry, someone with an annual income of over $500,000. But it didn't stop there. She had a list of conditions, specific requirements that her future husband needed to meet. The post read like a business proposal, which is ironic considering what happened next. Now, you might think this kind of post would just get ignored or laughed at, but no, someone responded. And this response, this absolute masterpiece of a reply, would go on to become one of the most shared, screenshot, and discussed messages in internet history. The person who responded identified themselves as someone who actually met her financial requirements. They claimed to have an annual income exceeding $500,000. They perfectly fit what she was looking for. But instead of expressing interest, instead of playing along, this person did something completely unexpected. They analyzed her proposal like a Wall Street investor evaluating a bad stock. They broke down her entire premise with cold, calculated logic that was so brutal, so perfectly articulated, that it left no room for argument. The response started politely enough. "My dear, beautiful lady, I read your post with interest, and I think many beautiful girls have questions similar to yours. Allow me to analyze your questions as a professional investor. See, they're being respectful, almost gentle. But then comes the sledgehammer. My total annual income is over $500,000, which perfectly matches your requirements. From my perspective as a businessman, it would be a bad decision to marry you. Here's my short answer, and let me explain why. Can you imagine reading that? You post an ad looking for a rich husband. Someone actually qualifies, and then they tell you why marrying you would be a terrible investment. The audacity is incredible. But it gets so much better. The responder continues. Regardless of the details, what you're doing now is a pure transaction, an exchange of your beauty for my money. Person A has the beauty, and person B will pay money for that beauty. A perfectly fair and straightforward transaction. They're not wrong. She literally posted an ad saying, "I'm beautiful, you're rich, let's make a deal." It was transactional from the start, but then comes the economic analysis that absolutely destroys the entire premise. However, there's a fatal problem here. Your beauty will inevitably diminish over the years, while my money isn't expected to diminish without a strong reason. The truth is, my income will likely increase from year to year, while you won't be any more beautiful in a few years. This is where it gets absolutely savage. They're applying basic economic principles to human attractiveness. Depreciation, asset value, return on investment. They're treating her proposal like a business deal because that's exactly what she presented it as. And they're explaining, in the most clinical way possible, why it's a bad deal. So, from an economic perspective, I represent an asset whose value increases over time, while you represent a consumer asset whose value decreases. Ouch! They just called her a depreciating asset. Not a person, not a partner, but a consumer product that loses value. But they're not done yet. If your beauty is all you own, things will get worse because you won't be a normal consumer product, but rather a product with a very high depreciation rate that will completely expire within 10 years. 10 years. They gave her beauty a shelf life of 10 years. Now, before anyone gets upset, remember, she started this. She posted an ad reducing herself to her looks and reducing potential husbands to their bank accounts. This person simply followed her logic to its natural conclusion. They held up a mirror and showed her exactly what her proposal actually meant when you stripped away all the romance and pretense. It was brutal, yes, but it was also remarkably insightful. The response went even further, though the full version that circulated online included more detailed financial advice. The responder suggested that if she wanted to maintain her lifestyle, she should focus on building her own wealth rather than relying on someone else's. They pointed out that renting is smarter than buying when it comes to depreciating assets. They essentially told her that if a wealthy man was smart, he'd date her, enjoy her company, but never marry her. Because marriage would mean buying a depreciating asset at its peak value. Think about how cold that is. They're saying you're at your most beautiful right now, which means you're at your most expensive right now, and from a financial standpoint, it only goes downhill from here. So why would anyone lock in at the highest price point? It's the kind of logic that makes perfect sense if you remove all emotion and humanity from the equation, which is exactly what she did in her original post. The internet absolutely exploded when this exchange went public. It got shared millions of times. It was posted on forums, blogs, social media, news sites. People couldn't stop talking about it. Some people thought it was hilarious, the perfect comeback to an entitled gold digger. Others thought it was cruel and misogynistic, reducing a woman to nothing more than her physical appearance. But here's the thing. Both sides were kind of right. On one hand, the response was undeniably harsh. Telling someone their beauty will expire in 10 years, calling them a depreciating asset, suggesting they're not worth marrying because they don't offer long-term value. That's brutal no matter how you frame it. It reduces human worth to market value, which is a pretty dark way to view relationships. On the other hand, she literally started it. She posted an ad that reduced herself to her looks and reduced men to their wealth. She turned marriage into a business transaction. The responders simply analyzed that transaction using actual business principles. If you're going to treat love like commerce, don't be surprised when someone gives you a financial analysis. What made this response so viral wasn't just the savagery of it. It was the precision. This wasn't someone angrily insulting her. This wasn't name-calling or crude jokes. This was a methodical, logical breakdown of why her proposal made no sense from a rational perspective. It was intellectual brutality, which is somehow more devastating than emotional brutality. The person who wrote this didn't get mad. They got calculated, and that made it unforgettable. The response also tapped into something deeper, a cultural conversation about relationships, money, beauty, and gender dynamics. It raised uncomfortable questions. Is it okay to seek a partner primarily for their wealth? Is it okay to seek a partner primarily for their beauty? Are these things equivalent? Should relationships be transactional? What does it say about society that posts like hers exist in the first place? What does it say that responses like his resonate with so many people? Some people defended the woman, saying she was just being honest about what she wanted. Everyone has preferences, right? Some people want intelligence, some want humor, some want wealth, some want beauty. Is it really so different to be upfront about wanting financial security? After all, money matters in life. It affects where you live, how you live, the opportunities you have, the stress you experience. Wanting a partner who's financially stable isn't necessarily shallow. It's practical. But there's a difference between wanting financial stability and literally advertising for a husband based solely on income requirements. There's a difference between considering wealth as one factor among many and making it the primary, explicit criterion. Her post wasn't about finding love with someone who happened to be successful. It was about finding success that happened to come with a person attached. Others pointed out the double standard. Men who seek young, beautiful wives are often criticized, but somehow it's more socially acceptable for women to seek wealthy husbands. Why is that? Is it because of historical gender roles where men were providers and women were homemakers? Is it because women have traditionally had less access to wealth and power, so seeking it through marriage was one of the few options available? These are complicated questions with no easy answers, but this viral exchange brought them all to the surface. The responders' use of economic terminology was particularly effective. By calling her a depreciating asset, they used language from finance and business to make their point. Assets appreciate or depreciate. Consumer goods have shelf lives. Investments have returns. These are neutral, objective terms, but when applied to human beings, they become deeply uncomfortable. And that discomfort was the point. The responder was saying, "You want to play this game? Fine, let's play it properly. Let's use the actual rules of the game you started." The comparison between increasing and decreasing value was especially cutting. The responder positioned themselves as an appreciating asset, someone whose value increases over time through career growth, accumulated wealth, experience, and connections. Meanwhile, they positioned her as a depreciating asset, whose primary value, beauty, inevitably declines with age. It's harsh, but if we're being honest, there's a kernel of uncomfortable truth there. Physical beauty, by conventional standards, does tend to peak in youth. That's just biology. But here's where the logic falls apart when you actually think about relationships. Human beings aren't assets. Partnerships aren't investments. Love isn't a transaction. The problem with both the original post and the response is that they both treat human relationships like business deals. She reduced men to wallets. He reduced women to products. Both perspectives are fundamentally dehumanizing. A real relationship, a healthy relationship, is built on mutual respect, shared values, emotional connection, compatibility, trust, and yes, attraction, and practical considerations too. But it's so much more than a simple exchange of beauty for money. People grow together. They support each other. They create shared experiences and build a life that's greater than the sum of its parts. You can't put that in a spreadsheet. You can't calculate the ROI on genuine love. But this viral exchange didn't happen in the context of genuine love. It happened in the context of a transactional proposal. So a transactional response was actually perfectly appropriate. The woman asked for a business deal, and the investor explained why the terms were unfavorable. From a purely logical standpoint, the response was flawless. What's fascinating is how this exchange has endured. It's been over 15 years since this originally happened, and people still reference it. It's become part of internet folklore. Whenever someone posts something entitled or transactional about relationships, someone inevitably brings up the Craigslist gold digger and the investor's response. It's become a cautionary tale, a reminder that if you reduce yourself and others to transactions, don't be surprised when someone audits your balance sheet. The story also highlights how the internet has changed the way we communicate about taboo subjects. Before social media and forums and anonymous posting, these kinds of conversations happened privately if they happened at all. Now, someone can post their most materialistic desires publicly, and someone else can publicly eviscerate them for it, and millions of people can watch and comment and share. It's a new form of social accountability, for better or worse. There's also something darkly comedic about the whole thing. The formality of the response, the professional investor language, the clinical assessment. It's like reading a rejection letter from a venture capital firm. We regret to inform you that after careful consideration, we have decided not to pursue this opportunity. Your projected value trajectory does not align with our investment strategy. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. It's absurd, which is part of why it's so memorable. The response also works because it's so well written. Whoever wrote it had a gift for articulation. They structured their argument clearly, used appropriate analogies, and maintained a professional tone throughout, even while delivering devastating criticism. It's the kind of writing that makes you think, I wish I could come up with responses like that. It's the perfect combination of intelligence, timing, and savagery. But let's circle back to the woman who posted the original ad. What happened to her? We don't know. The post was anonymous. She disappeared into internet history. Maybe she read the response and had a moment of self-reflection. Maybe she was mortified that her ad went viral. Maybe she doubled down and continued looking for her wealthy husband. Maybe she laughed it off. We'll never know. What we do know is that her post and the response it generated started a conversation that's still relevant today. In an age of dating apps where people filter potential partners by height, income, education, and attractiveness, the transactional approach to relationships has only become more prevalent. Swipe culture has turned dating into a marketplace where everyone is constantly evaluating and being evaluated. In that context, the Craigslist exchange feels less like an outlier and more like an extreme example of something that's become normalized. The truth is, most people do consider practical factors when choosing partners. That's not inherently wrong, but when those practical factors become the only factors, when relationships become purely transactional, something essential is lost. The magic of human connection, the unpredictability of love, the joy of discovering someone who surprises you. All of that disappears when you're just checking boxes on a list of requirements. The investor's response, for all its brutality, was actually a gift in disguise. It forced everyone who read it to confront uncomfortable truths about how we value ourselves and others. It asked us to consider what we're really offering in relationships and what we're really seeking. It challenged the idea that beauty or wealth alone are sufficient foundations for a life partnership. So what's the lesson here? Maybe it's that if you're going to treat relationships like transactions, you'd better be prepared for someone to analyze the transaction. Maybe it's that human worth can't be reduced to a single attribute, whether that's beauty or wealth or anything else. Maybe it's that the best relationships are built on seeing each other as whole people, not as assets or products or means to an end. Or maybe the lesson is simpler. Don't post anonymous ads on Craigslist expecting fairy tale outcomes, because the internet is full of people who will absolutely destroy you with logic. This exchange remains one of the most brutal, brilliant, and unforgettable takedowns in internet history. It's a reminder that words have power, that logic can be devastating, and that sometimes the most savage response is the one that's completely, uncomfortably true. The beautiful woman wanted a wealthy husband. What she got instead was a financial analysis that went viral and became an internet legend. And somewhere out there, the person who wrote that response is probably still smiling about it.